This is White Creole Conversations, conversations about whiteness in the Caribbean in a new context. I'm Annalee Davis, and I'm here today with Debra Hughes. So, Debra, give me a little bit of an idea about how you classify yourself, or you were beginning to talk about what your background is like.
I think straight off the bat, if somebody asked me, I would probably say I'm a white Barbadian.
Mm-hmm.
It's difficult to, however liberal your views are, to divorce yourself from a racial definition in a society that for 300 years has defined itself by race. It would be like asking a black man if he considered himself to be black.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say I'm a white Barbadian. But that does not, I don't think it controls or colors my life. I have a perhaps slightly different background from most white Barbadians, certainly of my age. My father is from an old white Barbadian planter family. He married, my mother is, I would say, probably lower middle class, what would be considered white.
Mm-hmm.
But she herself is of unusual racial origins because her mother is Guyanese Amerindian and probably black and Dutch father. So I think they struggled all their lives because they look very different to
Mm-hmm.
their peers. Some are very olive skinned, some are
Mm-hmm.
much fairer. They struggled all their lives, and I suppose the lower down the social order you are, the harder it becomes.
Right.
With, I think, a question of their own identity.
Mm-hmm.
My father, on the other hand, and totally liberal. I have never heard my grandmother, his mother, or my great aunts, I have never heard them speak of race, ever. In all my years growing up.
Wow.
They never used any racial epithet,
Mm-hmm.
but they came from a very strictly social, ordered society
Mm-hmm.
where I suppose everyone knew their place.
Right.
So there was no need, perhaps in
Mm-hmm.
their daily lives,
Mm-hmm.
to talk about that. It's lower down the order that you have that
Right.
problem, as it were.
Right.
And they were very Victorian. Brought up, they're of that age. They were born in the 1800s.
Right.
So that really is probably my greatest influence
Right.
in life.
Right.
That Victorian outlook.
Right. Right.
So you sort of couple that with my father's then more liberal view.
Mm-hmm.
He went to university in Canada and so on. And when my parents were divorced, he married a black woman. So here was I at about age 9 or 8, 9, 10 kind of thing. Not only are my parents divorced, which in the 1960s was highly unusual in Barbados,
Mm-hmm.
but then my father marries a black woman.
Right.
That sort of put me in a little universe all of my own.
Mm-hmm.
Because naturally, sometimes my stepmother would come and pick me up at school. And like you could see all these wheels turning both on the white and the black end of the spectrum. Like, who is this woman? And,
Right.
and she had a little sports car too. So like we couldn't exactly kind of fade into the background. So I come to the whole question of race from a different perspective.
Right.
Where you have to notice it, but I tend to judge people from what they are. You obviously you have, the first thing you see is somebody's race.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care if you're Chinese, Indian, you have to see it.
Mm-hmm.
Once you're not blind.
Mm-hmm.
And there have been occasions obviously in my life where you have a preconceived idea.
Right.
Because of the way somebody looks. whether they're clean, dirty, got long hair, locks, black,
Right.
white.
Yeah.
Everybody has a preconceived idea.
Right. Right.
But I try not to. That doesn't seem to enter my everyday consciousness of
Right.
how I react with
Right.
people.
Right. Okay. Wow. Okay. So then, once that transition happened and your father married a black woman, were there conversations around race growing up with in that context? Was that ever something that was discussed, or were your understandings about race just implicit, like they were just implied?
I think he might have spoken to us, but I don't remember now anything that would have stood out.
Right. Okay.
My mother was, not only did she have the whole thing of someone who she was married to marrying again,
Right.
but then the fact that he married a black woman, oh, she was really pissed off.
Right. Yeah.
As you can imagine,
Yes.
for somebody of her age
Of
and from
course.
her social
Right.
background.
Right.
She has since overcome
Right.
because a lot of that, because now she and my stepmother now I wouldn't say that they don't go to each other's houses every week, but they're friends.
Wow. Okay.
You know.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about what makes you feel that you belong to Barbadian society? Like, I'm curious if some people speak about belonging in racial terms or national terms. What makes you feel connected to Barbadian society?
I don't know that that's an easy question to answer, because I know that I'm connected, I feel connected.
Mm-hmm.
For me to specifically say the things that influence those feelings, apart from your just living or your memories,
Mm-hmm. Or is there something that makes you feel specifically Barbadian, an activity, or, I guess I'm trying to figure out how do we belong to a place? What makes us belong to a place?
I think for me it would be probably my growing up. I grew up at a time where, over independence,
Right.
where nationalism was high on the agenda, and where it was important to be a Barbadian.
Right.
And I think that probably is where my grounding is, where my roots would be.
So you
in
remember
that whole
that
independence experience, of
right.
course, yes.
Yes.
Definitely.
Okay.
I could remember going to the garrison on Independence Night.
Really?
And it being lots of rain and sitting on my dad's shoulders and watching I didn't fully understand, the whole event or
Right.
the importance of it.
Right.
But I remember being there.
Yeah.
So that would have then subsequently colored later things as I grew up.
And that was a positive thing, becoming independent.
For me,
being a part
yeah.
of that.
Well, in our household, I would say yes.
Yes. Right. Okay.
I suppose that I used to hear on the periphery, I think, you used to hear about white Barbadians, mainly probably of a certain social class, who were leaving by the late 60s, early 70s. But that certainly would never have entered into the discussion in our
your
household.
family. Right. And are there experiences where you feel that maybe you don't belong?
No.
Is that ever okay?
No, I don't. I wouldn't succumb to them.
Right.
I wouldn't allow anybody else to make me feel that way.
Right.
Put it that way.
Okay. So one of the things we've been talking a little bit about is privilege, and I think whether or not white Barbadians are reflect on or are aware of how privilege might operate because of race. Can you talk about privilege? Have you experienced privilege? Are you conscious of being privileged as a white Barbadian?
I would say yes. Even in very simple ways. You walk into a rum shop to buy a drink, and there are people ahead of you and the shopkeeper will say, "We'll serve you first. You come to buy a Coke or something," and they'll jump ahead of everybody else. They put you on the top of the queue. That's a very small example,
Right.
but it exists like that.
Right.
And of course, you can take that all the way up to business arrangements. And although in those cases, I think sometimes now that's more also a result of networking.
Right.
And the old boys club and who knows who. And,
right.
And even within that, there's probably been a huge shift, because obviously the people of wealth today are not the same people of wealth of yesteryear.
Right.
So even if they're all still white,
right.
or appear to be white.
Right. Okay. Yes. And can you speak about like a different experience where maybe because of being read as white, you were possibly denied or ostracized in any way, in work or social circles?
Probably not officially. Obviously, people have their own preconceived ideas of what you are as a white person. I actually remember once someone asking me, a young lady that I employed on a sort of a casual basis to hand out flyers and so on. She said to me, "Are you white or black?" I said, "Why is it important?" She says, "Well, this person who knew us both says that you're white, but I think you're black." Probably, you get racial epithets hurled at you because you're white or whatever, but you stand up. I stand my ground. And then people quietly or quickly realize, well, but I can't say that it's impacted significantly on anything I wanted to achieve, or, my comfort in the Barbadian space, anywhere I would go, none of those things. But I might be unusual because my family has a very, I don't know how to put it. I think, well, certainly all of the children of my generation were always taught to be strong.
Right.
Mentally and physically strong, and never let people take advantage of you.
Right. Right.
So that sort of transcended all the things that we tend to do. So they're never going to back down from a situation where they feel threatened, whether it's racially or if you think somebody's going to snatch your bag, or they're going to stand up. Boys and girls, and probably girls more than boys. So it doesn't bother me.
So you've also then experienced white as being variable, because if she's reading you as black, when you travel, are you read differently than you are in Barbados? Or that's not something you think of?
I think when I travel, I would be probably regarded as white.
Okay.
Except maybe in England.
Okay.
They may, but they have a totally different social.
Right. Right. Yeah.
You're considered, you're not considered white, you're considered foreign.
Right. Okay. Can you talk about...
And now that you speak of travel, I just want to give you one other experience. I once went to India, and I was totally uncomfortable.
Why?
Because I couldn't read Indian people. I had not been exposed to a mass of Indians as a race. If you had put me in Africa, I think I would have been more comfortable. As strange as that sounds. I could not read the people. I felt totally uncomfortable racially.
Right. So it
was a very strange experience.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I put it down to. I can't really explain.
Because normally you can enter a space and you're comfortable because you understand certain dynamics, but you couldn't read it there.
Couldn't read it in India.
Yeah. Okay.
Maybe because among their own people, they have so many divisions.
Right.
Because I've been in Hong Kong, I didn't feel that way. Among Chinese.
Right. That's interesting.
It's very strange.
Yeah. So can you talk a little bit about how you socialize, whether or not, would you say that you socialize a lot across race lines? I mean, still in Barbados, you can go to an event of 300 white people or 300 black people. And sometimes I think we're not conscious that we're maintaining very clear lines socially. Would you say that your social space is an integrated space? Are you
Totally.
conscious of that?
Totally.
Yeah.
But that's because I grew up with a black stepmother. My
Right.
brother married a black Venezuelan.
Mm-hmm.
I have black, well, they're both adopted, but
Mm-hmm.
let's say half brother and sister.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll tell you my funny story now. My brother, who is black Barbadian and very black, we were once out working, doing the same thing, going door to door, talking to people. And one of the old ladies said to me, "Oh, you got a handsome young fella here with you," inferring some relationship
Right.
between us.
Right.
So I laughed and I said, "No, he's my brother." And she looked at him and she looked at me. And he said, "Different mother, same father."
She didn't know what to do with
No,
that.
she couldn't figure it out. And he was obviously a little bit uncomfortable too because of his response.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, and when I actually taught at the convent for a year where my half sister, who is of mixed race,
Mm-hmm.
went to school, and the little kids at school asked her, "Is it true that Rhonda is your sister?" Because they could obviously see a difference
Right.
at 5 or 6,
Right.
you know.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. One of the questions I have is if you've had any really difficult conversations around race, or if you have a particular relationship to British colonial history and its relationship to Barbados, if there's any ideas about shame connected to, some people speak about feeling guilt in terms of a history. I mean, are those things that you've ever thought about?
I don't
Yeah.
feel guilt. My father's a historian.
Right.
So
Yes.
I know the history inside out.
Right.
It's always been in the background of our lives. Parts of many discussions,
Okay.
interests.
Right.
So
Right. Okay.
So it's not my guilt or my shame.
Right. So having a different understanding to history, it sounds like, is important there, because I think something that people have spoken about is the way in which history is taught in secondary school makes for some measure of discomfort. But maybe...
Oh, I could see that, because I myself was once a bit annoyed at a history lecturer who actually taught me A-level history for a short while, and then at the university. And I went home and complained to my father, who used to teach at the university as well. He said, "Oh, don't mind him." And of course, you know, my father had a long running battle with Hilary Beckles about Bassa.
So tell me about that.
Well, my father's view, I suppose, of Hilary Beckles is that he is a careless researcher. Something which is, there was, I think his name might have been Connell at the museum, who did a review on one of Beckles' early books, would concur with. He's a sloppy researcher. And he was of the view that he ignored some of the known detail, historical detail, to put forward this view as Bassa as the leader of the rebellion, when clearly Washington Pitt Franklin was just as influential, and whom they chose to ignore because he was half white.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how the whole argument.
Right. So that's an interesting thing to me, because somebody spoke to me about that the other day, Carl Watson.
Mm-hmm. Well, Carl would know a lot.
Right. And so I find that an interesting thing in terms of, well, creating heroes initially is a peculiar thing to do, I think, in some ways. But also an insistence on creating a particular kind of hero versus another kind of hero.
I was actually shocked when I saw Beckles say the other day that T.T. Lewis should be a national hero, because he was on the committee that made a recommendation.
Right.
Why you didn't recommend it then?
Right. Yeah.
But you see, you know what your parents say, age brings reason.
Yeah.
So maybe
Yes.
he has a different view. And
Yeah.
he had a particular agenda at that point
Right.
in his life.
Right. Yes.
I mean, there's a man whose grandmother's white
I didn't know that.
from St. Andrew.
Right.
So
Yeah.
you see, people bring all kinds of things from the background, you know. And there's so many Barbadians who have mixed
Of course.
heritage, and you can go from black to white in 2 generations.
Yeah.
I know so many people.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
you know, like, what does it really mean?
Yeah. Well, that's what we're trying to figure out. Okay. I mean, I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to, if there's anything else you're thinking of that you would want to share. In terms
Not
of
specifically, only that I think that conversations like this are important. I think very often we only hear one side of the story now. And no matter how uncomfortable it is, I think that both sides of the story need to be heard. Because I think that a lot of white people do feel as if they are being blamed for something. That comes across very strongly. That they're being blamed for something that they know nothing about, that they have no control over anymore. And it's important that maybe the other side of the story, of today's story, is told.
Yeah.
Did you watch that wonderful documentary on
BBC?
Yeah, just a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought that was wonderful.
Yeah, it was good. It was good. Yeah, that's why I kind of feel that the time is, it feels to me like the time is right to have these conversations, and I feel that things are changing a little bit. But also what is so striking is the diversity within the white community.
But that's a lot of thing that Barbadians don't understand either.
No.
They don't understand that there is as much division among the white society as there is between black and white.
Yes. And
they
also
don't get it.
That whiteness isn't homogenous, right?
No.
But there's a I mean, just the fact you have a grandmother, you said, or a mother who is Amerindian, Dutch.
Grandmother, yeah.
You know, I mean, it's so phenomenal, the people that are coming in and having these conversations, the breadth of
the racial makeup.
Yeah.
I often think I would like to do one of those DNA profiles where you know what all the little parts are.
Yeah, that would be interesting in your case.
I actually think they should do that with a lot of people in Barbados. They'll be surprised. On both sides of the color spectrum.